Governments all across the world are borrowing billions and maybe trillions of dollars, more than they can ever collect back in taxes. And it looks like you and I are going to have to foot the bill eventually. It's about the debt compared to the size of the economy, or GDP. But think of GDP as the denominator. If the country is borrowing more than its GDP, then it goes over 100%. But if we can grow the economy and GDP increases, that brings the debt to GDP ratio back down to 100 or hopefully less than 100 in the long run. And that's what most countries are trying to do. But there is a tipping point. Let's say interest rates are high, like 5%, but the growth of the economy is only 3%, then GDP will never ever catch up to its debt and a borrowing death spiral will occur, where a country is no longer able to pay off its debt and has to borrow more money to pay off its debt, which increases its debt, and then it just gets really, really bad from there. So eventually the governments will have to cut back on spending and reduce social services. Now this is happening to many countries in the world, but the US is partially shielded because they hold the world reserve currency and they can always keep borrowing money because of that. But therefore, countries like the UK are facing a really, really hard time. And if you're wondering how Singapore is faring, our debt is more than GDP as well. But what makes Singapore special is our strategic reserves. We have the capacity to pay off its debt. And then why is Singapore even having debt in the first place? It's because Singapore is able to invest the debt to grow faster than the rate that it borrows. So if interest rates are at 5%, but it is able to grow the investments at a rate of 7%, then you're able to make that 2% profit. And this is before taking into consideration the economic growth and GDP increase. Now that sounds all good for us living in Singapore, but it's also still important for us to take note what's going on the other side of the world, because we're all interconnected and what's happening over in the rest of the world will impact Singapore as well. And especially if you are invested in assets overseas, taking note of this is going to be very important to decide where we're going to invest our money next. Because a country that may be going through austerity very soon is not going to be having a very strong economy.